All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's tasting with Thompson's Brothers. We've got five amazing whiskies, one rum in tonight's tasting. We've got half of the Thompson Brothers guests joining tonight. Phil, welcome, Phil.
Hello.
I believe Simon, the other half, might be joining in a little bit later as well.
Yeah, probably after 9 a.m. Our time, so 20 minutes or so, I would think.
No worries. And then also in the background, who are the official importers and distributors of Thompson Brothers in Australia. They're busy working in the bar. It's not a virtual background, is the wonderful Kelvin and Yao of the Elysian Whiskey Bar in Melbourne. So they're doing their thing in the background there. But yeah, this tasting's been brought on because they bring these excellent whiskies into the country, and it's awesome to get Phil and Simon later on to jump on and have a chat to us about what they're doing. But I think, Emma, we might kick off with tonight's whiskey, so I might hand it over to you. What's the tasting order?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've just popped the tasting order up now for you guys. But as per usual, if you've got enough glasses, if you've got 6 glasses, to pour them all out and, see them side by side and compare. The usual, don't drive. Hopefully no one's going anywhere for the rest of tonight. And water as you need. Is warm in Melbourne, so I will be drinking a lot of water throughout this. But yeah, I'm very, very excited that we're getting to try Thompson Brothers. It's a brand I've known about for a little bit. And obviously I don't want to try and steal the thunder when we have one of the Thompsons here. So everyone grab your Linkwood 10-year-old, pour it out, and Phil, if you could kind of take us through what led you to us and what led you to bottling whiskey.
Cool. Yeah, well, I'll just quickly introduce the whiskey. So this is a 2011 Linkwood, 10 years old, 55.7 from a D-char rechar hogshead, which is I really like it for kind of medium to long-term maturation. I think it works really well if you want to kind of still be able to taste a bit of distillate character. It kind of gives you all the best things about a first fill bourbon barrel, but also kind of the best things about a refill hogshead. So you do get lots of spirit character, but it kind of gets, I suppose, sanded off a wee bit by the D-char rechar wood. So big fan of D-char rechar. We do a lot of filling of D-char rechar for our own spirit here at Dornick. We have a very good relationship with Invergordon Grain Distillery, which is 25 minutes away. So we basically take our spent cask from our third-party bottlings, so our independent bottlings, take them down to Invergordon Distillery. They shave them, they toast them, and they rechar them. Might put fresh hoops or fresh heads on them, and then we take them back. And for our own Dornick spirit, we think it's perfect. We obviously do mix it up with other cask types, but as a rule of thumb, D-char rechar is brilliant because you are able to detect and sense that distillate character. So yeah, I've gone off on a tangent because I was going to tell you about us, but I started talking about D-char rechar wood. But yeah, it's a brilliant wood type. If you kind of follow what we do, I love Linkwood. It was a bit of a revelation to me when I started. Obviously we've had a whiskey bar before we had a distillery, so we ran Dornick Castle Whiskey Bar, and then we were stupid enough to spend all of our money on starting a distillery and selling our house in order to do so, crowdfunding as well. But before that, when we had the bar, we used to taste Linkwood, and it was a great dram. I think the problem was at that time you were very much the 14-year-old. I think it's 14-year-old from the Flora and Fauna range was kind of all you had access to, and when we started taking it on as an independent bottler, I was kind of buying it to bulk up my orders. I wasn't really thinking, I'm going to bottle loads of Linkwood. I was just buying it as a filler malt to bulk up my orders. And then I was like, it was total revelation, really nice, fruity, bright, a little bit floral, these lovely kind of lily notes to it. And finding it in that D-char rechar wood really worked very well for us. So a bit of a revelation, but it's a testament to, I'm sure you guys will probably start finding this a bit more as you'll find more independent bottlings hopefully coming through into Australia, is Diageo. They make, you can say what you want about them as a company, but when it comes to making single malt whiskey consistently good, they do a brilliant job, and they market it well, they sell it well, the prices are reasonable. When they work with bottlers, they're really supportive of the overall idea of independent bottling, and they see it as a added value to their brands. You know, I mean, I'm talking about Linkwood now on to 14 people on the other side of the world on behalf of Diageo. So I think they kind of see the value in that. But when we receive their casks, whether it's Linkwood, Coela, Kleinwich, whatever, they're so unbelievably consistent, and not just consistent in the flavor profile, but in the fill levels. So obviously the storage conditions are absolutely perfect. The cask conditions are perfect. It's really quite an impressive operation. I mean, you can argue the romance is kind of gone at that point when it becomes like that efficient, where you lose these kind of amazing peaks. And we'll maybe talk about that later, but it's a little bit about kind of modern whiskey that you find is just like, it's so unbelievably amazingly consistent, but you don't have these amazing peaks that you would find in old style distillates. I think that's kind of one of the things that's missing there. So yeah, what did you ask me, Emma? We're going to talk about, I've just started going off the tangent, so I'll tell you about our
business.
It's all
good. It's all good. I mean, I love Linkwood, and I think I know quite a lot of people in the tasting tonight are big fans of Linkwood. So much white flowers, and please everyone add your tasting notes in the chat. But I think, you know, maybe kind of getting back to, you guys had the Door Knock Castles or Door Knock Hotel whiskey bar and whatnot. Yeah. So, you know, I think I read you guys were working behind the bar since you were kids, pretty much, you and your brother.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. No, I looked as young as Kelvin when I was working behind the bar. No, we were there, I think 2000. So our parents bought the hotel. At that time, it was pretty kind of run down and derelict, and just a kind of touring / golfing hotel, and it kind of plateaued. So yeah, they bought that in 2000. I think I would have been at that time 14, 15 years old, something like that. So through necessity, we were working in the bar, cleaning glasses, you know, kind of getting the stock up, and, you know, same with the restaurant, the kitchen and so on. And we were working with like various, I'm sure Kelvin and Yao know of inconsistent hospitality staff who may disappear on extended cigarette breaks. And you were just kind of stood there behind the bar and had Americans talking to you about like, what's that? What does that taste like? And you know, you have to kind of then be able to kind of process that information and provide them with an answer. So yeah, it was kind of through necessity. And then, you know, we went away, I studied, my brother studied, we came back, and you know, we came back just to work in the hotel for a little bit before we decided what we were going to do. As I think every student nowadays does, they go off and study something, kind of forced into a corner into studying something that perhaps they don't feel is the right thing at the age of 18 or 19 years old. I think it's you know, perhaps people should be given a little bit more time and go and experience a bit, work a bit. So yeah, we came back without really an idea of what we wanted to do. And then Simon was working there and had started buying for the bar. And we just kind of, he was accumulating these kind of more and more bottles from, we were just opening up the Gordon MacPhail catalogue and buying kind of cool stuff. One of the highlights I remember was a 1956 Glen Grant 50-year-old. And we were like, I can't remember what we're paying for it, but we were charging £15 a measure. And we thought, you know, that was really, really expensive for a bottle of whiskey, like super, like for a measure of whiskey. And then, you know, we'd rarely sell, we'd sit in the bar for ages. And then we had these like young Norwegian guys came in and just devoured the whole bottle in a night. And they were like, this is the same price as the Jack Daniels and Coke in Oslo. And we just, you know, drinking the whole thing. And then we just kept accumulating bottles, and we started buying older bottles. We started noticing differences in like older distillates, especially at that time from Gordon MacPhail. You could buy basically anything going back to like the 40s and at reasonable prices. So the gantry was just filled with stuff, you know. And then we started buying at auction, picking up bottles from auction, getting a bit more interested in that side of it, the antique bottles, and kind of built a reputation for being a really famous bar for opening old and rare bottles, which we've opened many over the years. And then from there we found a destination. You know, we were becoming a bit of a destination bar, and more people were coming because we were opening amazing bottles, and not just coming to Dornoch for golf, which is what people would normally come to Dornoch for. It kind of ended up, we extended the season a little bit. You know, you were ending up getting whiskey clubs coming in, you know, in October and March, when you're normally a bit quieter in the hotel. So it was a positive thing overall for the business, you know, and I always say that we came into whiskey at the end of the age of innocence. So we're a few years, maybe 5 years at the end of the age of innocence, when the prices were still reasonable. You could walk into a shop and buy a good bottle at a reasonable price without kind of this constant hustle to get one bottle of Springbank 10-year-old. Which is kind of the way whiskey is at the moment. It's slightly frustrating. And then from there, I think we kind of I think my parents put the hotel up for sale at that time. I think it was, but it was not the right time to sell for, and not the right price they were asking for it. It was maybe a bit too much at the time. But they weren't also fussed about selling. They were just putting it on the market. And Simon had said, look, if it doesn't sell, we've got this shed in the corner of the garden. Let's put a distillery in it. And that was not long after, I think, Strathearn had started. So there was this huge barrier to entry for distillers, I think, in Scotland at that time, where you were looking at your options were basically you don't distill or you make a 1 million LPA distillery. So there was like nothing really in between at that point. Okay, not 1 million LPA, but there was hundreds of thousands of LPA distilleries. So there's nothing really in between. And then Strathearn came along with this kind of formula from North America, maybe a bit from Tasmania, where it was kind of like this almost like DIY punk attitude to distilling, where it's like, it doesn't need to cost you a fortune. You can do it yourself, you can market it yourself, and you can raise the money yourself. You don't need banks, you can just go in and do it. So we were looking at that going, well, these guys are, they've managed to start a distillery with not a lot of money in a tiny space. It's achievable. So yeah, from there we built a distillery. I think me and Simon, we sold our house and then our flat even, and then put the money into the distillery and crowdfunded at that time. So we crowdfunded, basically offering casks out from this theoretical distillery that didn't exist, which sounds like a scam to me. So we crowdfunded, but it's kind of a testament to where what we achieved in the crowdfunding was kind of a testament to the fan base we had in the whiskey bar, because people trusted us, and people trusted us because of what we had kind of achieved in the whiskey bar, which was kind of humbling. So shall we have the other dram while I'm ranting? Is that a thing we should do?
I've actually I was going to say, I've just Googled some quick photos, so for everyone at home to see. So this is I hopefully got the right picture. This is the hotel, the castle, yeah?
So that's that's the castle. It is up for sale now if you fancy it. I know, with your Australian dollars, that's probably the equivalent of like 3 pints of beer or something. That's the early days. 2 young, not so tired, thin guys. So that's a little shed. I mean, it's tiny. I don't know how many meters squared it is, but it's probably like 45 meters squared, something like that. It really is tiny. We worked out shipping containers, storage containers for storing a lot of the material, so bonded warehouses and stuff like that. It was kind of this, we wanted just to get it up and going for as little money as possible and focus all of our finances on the production side of it. So really focusing on barley. We're paying like 3 times what anyone else is paying for malted barley, because we're buying heritage, we're buying floor malted. So we kind of took this approach of like, saving money wherever possible, but then the production, we were spending whatever it took on the production to get the best possible material for processing, which is kind of proven that it's it's good.
What's with these unique still sizes? Because there's not typical distillery in Scotland setup.
Yeah, no, again, that comes from that kind of get it set up quick for not a lot of money. So I, with stills, shapes and sizes, these are little lambic stills from Hoga in Portugal. So they're kind of off the shelf stills. So they're available. You just order them, they'll take a couple of months and they'll get here. I mean, it's like the copper's not extremely thick, probably need replaced in about 1/3 of the time than a proper still would take. But we believe with the still shape and size that it's really, because we have this kind of like general adage in Scotch whisky, which is like, and if you have a tall still, you will have fruity spirit, and if you have a dumpy still, you will have a heavy, oily, malty, nutty spirit. And like, it's just total bollocks. It's just how you run it. you know, you could make a really light, delicate spirit on a small dumpy still. It's just how you choose to kind of run that still, and then obviously the processes that take place beforehand. So it's just kind of, it's because in the Scotch whisky industry, where, you know, it's just run hard and fast by, you know, people with who perhaps just see it as a job. It's an operator, you know, and they're not, you know, what's the matter? The stills run fast or slow. It's like, you know, whereas we take the approach with it where, you know, myself and Simon and Ewan and Jack who worked with us, and Jacob who worked with us before, it was all about making the cut points with sense and deciding, you as the individual, what do you feel, what do you taste, embracing the variation in seasonality, the variation in yeast varieties. Perhaps it's been a cold fermentation, a warm fermentation, the cooling waters could be hotter than usual, could be colder than usual, you know, so all of these little minute factors make a difference. So we take the approach of, let's make the best possible spirit that we can on that one day, you know, and making sure the staff get their nose into the glass, taste it, and decide when and where they're making the cut points, and that's kind of the most important thing for me that's missing in modern whiskey, is this kind of this human element. It's become a bit too much of a just a kind of copy and paste process where the processes are written out off-site. So kind of embracing the kind of seasonality and the variation in the spirit is really important, and that way you will make the best possible spirit on that one day, and possibly that may lead to the best possible cask at that point. So yeah, I know somebody's commenting that's our fish clock. It was provided by a friend of ours, John Beach. So it's very nice. I don't think it sits there anymore. It might be somewhere else in the distillery.
And last point before we jump onto whiskey number 2, we need to highlight that this is an exclusive bottling for Australia. It's been picked by yourself and Kelvin and Yao in the room. This Linkwood, it's what, 55.7% ABV. Usually the first whiskey of the tasting sometimes gets a little bit neglected because we rush onto the next whiskeys, and there's a big lineup of amazing brands. But I just want to say congrats to Kelvin and Yao for such an amazing pick. I'm really enjoying this Linkwood. It's clean, it's fresh. Well done, guys.
Thank you. Yeah, I got to chalk it up mainly to Phil, but you know, hope you guys enjoy it.
So it's really good. We're hopefully going to do another exclusive for Australia pretty soon. We've just done an exclusive for Andy Chew's got 1 or 2 Melbourne whiskey bar. It was kind of done as a bit of a done to support his bar. I think the guys, Yao and Kelvin, know Andy's. We've got a very good relationship with Andy, and wish him the best of success.
The whiskey as well, good.
The whiskey's great, yeah. Amazing whiskey. So yeah, we're keen to do another exclusive pretty soon. It's just time and money and space. That's kind of what limits us in anything and any day. Yep. So should we move on to? Shall I talk about the next one? Then we can just continue chatting. That's all right.
Yeah.
So
people loving that. Speyside 2006.
Cool. So this is a Speyside that spent a period of time being finished in a sherry cask, and when I bought it from my supplier, there's no notes on any like what type of sherry it is. I'm pretty sure it's a Amontillado, just from the kind of sense I have from it, the taste profile. You get this kind of salty nuttiness to it. It's a bit of a divisive one. Some people love it, and some people hate it. I think Serge gave it 91 points, which I don't think it's a 91-point whiskey. I'm pretty sure it's not. That's my opinion. But he likes weird, austere kind of whiskies, which is another thing in whiskey. If you know what Serge Valentine likes, then you send him the samples of the things that you're bottling that you know he'll like. He's got it's one man's opinion and one man's taste profile. So yeah, it's really, I like it. I think it's nice. It's got this kind of lovely kind of oiliness to it. So it's a Glen Elgin. The liquid's Glen Elgin. My supplier wouldn't let me use the name. 15 years old, I think, 2006. A batting of 2 first fill sherry casks, hogsheads, which I assume the liquid was re-racked. The liquid was re-racked, I think, in 2 or 3 years before. But it's good. For me, I'm pretty positive it's Amontillado. I think just in the taste profile, it's got that kind of oily, nutty earthiness to it that you find in the Amontillado sherry. Yeah, I'm quite a big fan of it, but like I said, pretty divisive. So I don't expect you to like it. I love it. should we say? Because I think one of the issues we had is that Surge rated at 91. Everyone was like trying it, and all of a sudden wanted to try it. You know, it's like we just bottled shit whiskey until Surge reviewed it, and then everyone was trying it. Really divisive. Folk were like, "This is weird. Why is this 91 points?" And I'm kind of in that camp, but you know, like I say, Surge likes kind of austere liquids. He likes Pinot sherries, and he likes Jura wines. He likes kind of really austere, crisp Alsatian wines. So he's got a very kind of perhaps a different palate and appreciation than like the general consumer might just does not see the depth in it that perhaps he does. But yeah, opinions welcome. Oh, taglines we've been used by Troy.
I'd love to see what people think of this dram. I completely agree. Like, it is very unusual. It reminds me of like those Greek dried figs, but not like the sweetness on the inside, just like the sugary skin on the outside, and like malic acid, the kind of acids you find in champagnes and stuff. So it's really cool. So at Glenallaghan, which I personally love, do you find it kind of hard with bottling? Obviously, you've got your own distillery and you're bottling in the meantime. Are you finding it hard to get your hands on casks, or, you know, what's being offered to you and stuff like that? Because I know that a lot of people we've spoken to who are independent bottlers recently are like, oh, it's getting tough out there. So, you know, how do you pick what you pick?
Yeah, it's not easy. Well, first of all, we are independent bottlers, so we're full process, so we do everything. We're not independent labeler, like 99% of independent bottlers. I say that a little bit tongue in cheek, but it's true. You know, it's worth defining it a little bit better that we are independent bottlers. So it's full process. Casks come to Dornoch, the glass comes to Dornoch, labels come to Galway, corks, captures, seals. It's filtered, it's bottled, it's everything happens here. So the only thing is, perhaps we don't do maturation, mainly because we don't have the space. So if I draw in the cask, we'll bring them up and have them bottled here. So it's full process, which kind of goes back to our, I think we haven't touched on it yet, but like our pricing policy, we try and basically have a philosophy of like good liquid at a fair price, and whether it's named or not named, but it's all about the price and the consumer. You know, because there's a lot of the bigger distillery companies and other companies who are charging ridiculous amounts for very similar liquid to that in which I see on the market. So it's kind of a little bit shameful from the perspective of a lot of bigger distillery companies. You know, a lot of the stock is not expensive stock. It didn't cost them a lot of money. So the market's a little bit overheated, in my opinion, at that kind of mid to high level. But there is still good casks out there. But yeah, I fully agree that it's really difficult to find good casks at the moment. I mean, we've got some pretty good relationships with some larger distillery companies and larger suppliers, which is good. There's a bit of trust capital being built up, whereby these guys, a lot of them, you know, they're not just doing it just to make money. Like, there is guys out there, brokers, who are just like what I call desktop brokers. Casks come in from an offer from one company, and they put their margin on, and they send a list out to multiple other companies, and they're just, you know, these guys are just arseholes, to be honest. You know, most of them, some of them are nice, but, you know, as people they're nice, but what they do is, you know, I've had lists coming in from suppliers from big distillery companies that have been marked up by like 50-60% almost instantly, and then sent out again, and that's not helping. Like, that's not helping the market. It's not helping the pricing for the consumer, because it's just overheating the whole thing. And they don't care, because they don't own the stock. It's not like they're sitting on it. You know, they're getting a list in, they're putting 50-60% on it and sending it out. If one cask sells, they're laughing. You know, they just made like thousands of pounds on one transaction that's taken minutes for them to process. It's just total bollocks. But yeah, we like I said, we've got good relationships with a lot of bigger distillery companies, some good brokers, and there's a bit of trust capital there, because they know what we do. We will put it in glass, and we will charge as fair a price as we possibly can for the liquid. So we're not out, you know, we plan on doing this for the rest of our lives. Like, I'm not in this just to make the quick bucks and have an IPO. Like, that's not what we're here for. Which is, I think, you know, I certainly get the impression with some companies it is that. Another thing that's kind of driving the lack of availability in the prices is it's this term I use for it is hobby bottler. You see it a lot in kind of some parts of Northern Europe and Asia, where guys are coming in and they're buying up the good stock at inflated prices. So, you know, the Bowmores, the Kleinliches, the Ben Nevises, the things that would be part of a profile or a portfolio of an independent bottler that would be like their kind of, you know, they're slightly higher end, more quality bottles. They're just coming in and buying them at a higher price, not quite understanding margins and route to market, and basically charging way more or paying way more than anyone else would for it, but they're doing it as a hobby. You know, wealthy individuals who are looking just to kind of give their friends some bottles, or sorry, sell their friends some bottles at like cost price. So they're paying, they might do the sums. You see it a lot at auction. When you see casks going up at auction, you're like, wait, hold on, nobody can bottle that. Like, you can't bottle that and make a margin. Nobody, like, the retailer has to be, you know, the retailer has to make a margin, the importer has to make a margin, taxes have to be paid, you know, bottling costs have to be paid. They don't quite understand that kind of process, and they're doing it because it's a hobby, because it's fun. So that's definitely inflated prices, and it's also meaning it's also meant the availability of the good stuff. So, you know, like I said, the Kleinliches, Lefroy's, Bowmores, Ben Nevis's, the kind of heavier crew distilleries just get filled up by hobby bottlers who are just kind of in it for, because it's a bit of fun, and bottling whiskey is great fun. But what it does do is it takes away from the people who employ people and, you know, our full process and have importers and stuff like that. So that's a little bit of a difficult thing, and it also helps inflate everything else. Yeah. So I see somebody's noted the single cask of Ardbeg for 28 million Australian dollars, which is yeah, pretty expensive. I would say it's yeah, it just shows you where the market is. I mean, you know, your distillery, what, mid-90s, that was sold for £8 million, sells for 16, one cask sells for 16 million. It's ridiculous. I remember my first trip to Islay was there. I went into a pub in Port Ellen, and they had the Ardbeg, an Ardbeg 1974 Fino Sherry butt on optic that was sold for the Fèis Isle, and it was like £6 or something, and it was on optic in the bar. And it just kind of shows you that, you know, same vintage of whiskey now sells for, or has been sold by the distillery for 16 million. And then they come out with this, like, I think they said, oh yes, but we're going to donate, like, I don't know, whatever it was, £100,000 to the local community, and you're just like, that's what you know, is that all? You know, from this thing. But I don't know. I think the whiskey industry is quite funny, because sometimes it can be a bit short-sighted, you know, in what it does and its actions. You know, it's kind of like the going's good now. So it's like, just fucking let's cash in. The problem is you lose your base consumer. You know, you lose the, you know, guys like us on this call who are like, you know, seeing these massively inflated prices. And, you know, hopefully we remember this. Like, you remember when Ardbeg, you know, in 10 years time, when perhaps prices might have softened. Who knows? I mean, I don't, you just don't know. And I like to think whiskey will remain stable for quite a while, and, you know, there'll be enough people interested in it. But it's just, yeah, it's a bit gratuitous, really, isn't it? Just to kind of gouge that, kind of take that sort of price. And the press release as well, I'm not really into all that sort of, you know, silliness. I would even argue, as much as casks of distinction's kind of quite annoying, because it's like all these amazing Diageo casks go off to these ultra wealthy people. At least they keep it quite quiet. Like, at least if somebody super rich buys like a 40-year-old Port Ellen, at least they kind of like don't have a massive.
No one ever knows.
Yeah, there's not the press release to go with it. It's just like a little bit more sort of like tactile. Which, yeah, the Ardbeg and the Macallan ones are just a bit, you know, I don't know, a little bit of a battle there. But yeah, whiskey's definitely, Scotch whiskey's definitely, I think all whiskey's just kind of a bit overheated at the moment. There's a bit of silliness in the market, to be honest, but not much I can do about that. Just, you know, keep our heads down and bottle good stuff and keep making Dornick. I think we should be okay.
Yeah, well, I think kind of leading on to a distillery that isn't big flashy headlights kind of news. We might move on to our third whiskey, the Tullibardine. Now I believe it's Leo is a massive fan of Tullibardine and trying to try as many as he can, which is very exciting. Also love the notes from the last space side, salt and pepper and nutty, and I completely agree, like the wine yeast sediment funk, absolutely, that is bang on the vibe. But
I like what you said, Emma, about the skin of the fig, and you can think of it with that kind of must on it. It's like kind of nutty, yeasty kind of thing going on. Yeah,
absolutely. But yeah, so onto the Tullibardine 1993 28-year-old. We've seen a lot of Tullibardines of this age range, which is great for people like me trying to get a birth year bottle. Just keep flooding the market with them. But tell us.
Nobody loves Tullibardine. That's why the loads came onto the market at once, because it was a big parcel of stock that was offered out a couple of years ago, and it was maybe 12, 14 casks of Tullibardine, and I managed to get a little bit of a break in the price. I think we bought like 3 of them, but because it was just a little bit too expensive. You're kind of going to your contacts and your suppliers going, but it's still Tullibardine. So can you just not take the price down a little bit? I know, sorry, Leo, but it's a hard sell. It's definitely a hard sell, and I don't think they've helped themselves. But the good thing is, for those of you who are Tullibardine fans, is Tullibardine seem to be one of these distilleries that are pumping out liquid to be sold into the investment market. So a lot of like these kind of charlatan investment companies are selling pallets, six ASBs of probably refill of Tullibardine. So in 10 or 20 years time, there's going to be loads of cheap Tullibardine because all of these investors will be cashing out thinking that they're going to get loads of money for their refill hogsheads of Tullibardine. So yeah, plenty in the future, don't worry. But a bit of an unloved distillery. I'm trying to remember my tasting notes on it because it's been ages since I've had it. But I think I seem to remember it being pretty good. It was a little bit grassy. But does anyone else want to lead on the tasting notes, because I don't have a glass in front of me?
Ollie said it was grassy as well. I'm just getting like it's very like a barnyard, but not like a very clean barnyard. that lovely like lanolin from the sheep, the hay bales for the animals, kind of, just that green
without a barnyard without animals, with all the stuff.
Well, the last Tully we had in a previous tasting was like morning dew on a meadow, grassy. Well, I agree with Emma's note. This is like fresh barnyard hay, but it's still like, asked me 5 years ago, 2 years ago, 12 months ago, I wouldn't know what a Tullibardine, like the spirit character is, but now I've had a few this year and it's such a distinctive spirit, and you either, I think, love it or hate it, or maybe you have to warm up to it. But we do a blind tasting. I'm now finally confident that I can start picking out this character. It's such a distinct spirit forward whiskey.
I'll need to reacquaint myself with it. I mean, I remember these were refill hogsheads. They were some of the first casks that we bottled in Dornoch. So going back to our full process independent bottlers, we bought a warehouse here and got various licenses required. 21, I think it was, early 21, I think, or late 20. And this was one of the first casks that we brought up here to be bottled, full process in Dornoch. They all came up from Invergordon distilleries. They were all lying at Invergordon, so it was a pretty easy pickup for us. And amazingly, they let us collect them in a transit van, which they probably shouldn't have. But yeah, that's by the by. But it's decent enough liquid, nice age to it. But I'm kind of struggling because I don't have it, so I'd love to tell you a bit more about it. But yeah, refill hogshead. Again, this straightforward kind of spirit character. So we one of the things that we kind of do here is we're quite selective on our filtration. We kind of make going back, I think I talked briefly about Linkwood from Diageo, their OB 14-year-old Flora and Fauna versus like independent Linkwoods a little bit. I kind of touched on it. And I think a lot of people taste independents and they go, oh, this doesn't, they feel like there's a bit more there than there is perhaps in the OB equivalents or like the OB bottlings they've had. Not talking about like the core standard stuff. And for us, a lot of it, for me, comes down to filtration. And it's not saying that heavy filtration on a whiskey removes kind of flavors, but what it does do is it removes these kind of oils and waxes that carry flavor. So they carry flavor into your palate and allows esters and aromas to hit different areas of your palate so that perhaps you wouldn't be picking up on a heavily filtered whiskey, which doesn't have these oils to kind of coat and carry. That's kind of the way that we kind of consider it. So it's those oils that are in the whiskey, it's not that it's adding loads and loads and loads of texture. It does have a difference to the texture, but it's not like you're adding the waxiness of clown leash. You're just adding something that carries the flavor. So it helps carry the flavor and protect your palate a little bit, so you don't get that kind of instant heat that you get sometimes on like an OB whiskey. So that's kind of something to consider. We started bottling ourselves. We use a 15 micron filter. So we try not to use anything smaller than a 15, but we will if we have to. So I think, for example, the 2006 Space Ed, I think that was a slightly smaller filter. It did have a bit of a haze to it, and that was really difficult to remove. So it's a kind of fine balance between, what does our consumer want and what is satisfactory to sit on a shelf. It's as much as there's loads of people out there who understand our philosophy and are geeks, they might not like a really hazy whiskey on a shelf. It might not sit right with them. So we have to kind of find that balance. But most of the time, we tend to find 15 microns perfect. 15 micron, removes any kind of visible particles, but it keeps that kind of texture. And we have found, when we bottled in the winter and we've used say a 5 micron filter, you open it up afterwards and it is like a gunk. It's like a waxy gunk. And you're like, okay, well, we're removing this by using a smaller micron filter, and it being cold, this gets removed from the whiskey. So, what effect does that have on your palate? And, it's not about, a little bit about texture, but more about like carrying flavor, allowing flavor to kind of access areas of your palate that perhaps wouldn't be able to detect the aromas and the characteristics of the whiskey, because they're kind of getting, the front of your palate's kind of taking the full brunt hit of the alcohol. So yeah, a little bit of a kind of pseudoscience there. Anyone want to say anything about the Tullibardine?
Yeah, no, people definitely, the fresh hay is the vibe. Ian mentioned Mars bars, and I kind of agree. The mousse layer of a Mars bar, the one that if you asked me to describe the flavor of it, I would have no idea. But it's kind of really great.
It's a bit like nougat, like a slightly cocoa-y nougat. Yeah.
I don't know. What is it? I feel like it'll just be one of those secrets you never know, like KFC herbs and spices.
I think it's best kept as a secret. I don't want to know. I'd like it just to be a secret for my life.
It's the sausage principle. I don't want to know how it's made, because otherwise I won't love it anymore, Tom, it's not a grain whiskey, it is a single malt whiskey, but yeah, Tullibardine is one that gets very overlooked, and so I'm really excited that we get to try another Tully so soon again.
I think Tom's probably, I agree, it's probably got a lot of grain characteristics, as in it's like quite cereal forward. I do seem to remember that. So yeah, it's probably perhaps the kind of cereal notes that are kind of really to the fore, and perhaps that kind of maybe a little bit of acetone in there that's perhaps which is probably a deeper heads cut, is kind of alluding to kind of a graininess to it.
Well, shall we move on to the next whiskey, number 4, the Highland 21-year-old? And I will be very honest. I've already poured it into my glass. I took a smell and I was like, what the ever-loving hell is going on in my nose right now? Like,
it's
on this insane.
It's weird. It's my kind of more delicate way of approaching it is it's a bit like a forest floor. That's how the marketing department would that we don't have, we'd approach it. But yeah, it's got this kind of real like heavy, earthy, damp leaf, kind of forest floor, slightly fungal, shiitake kind of thing going on. I keep going back and tasting it, and I keep liking it, but I also find it very weird and difficult, and I can understand why people, again, would hate it. As far as the distillery goes, a couple of theories. I bought it as peated Highland malt, and you know, the price is pretty good for what it is, for being the age that it is. But I'm not really getting that peat. I don't think it's super peaty, or maybe it's just that kind of earthiness is hiding any of that kind of peat. I'm agreeing that the mold, warm, wet mulch, and chlorine is yeah, probably pretty close to home. But yeah, it's definitely very weird, kind of funky stuff. I think there's a bit of like, reminds me of corktail, or reminds me of like a really, really, really old wine that's kind of perhaps fallen apart a bit at the seams. You know, it's kind of lost its stability and is a bit kind of funky, kind of like an old, like Chateau Moussard that's been aged for like 40 years. That's kind of just a bit funky and earthy and dirty. Yeah, it's pretty weird.
It's so cool. I honestly, it smells fuzzy. When I smell it, all I can think of is yellow fuzzy peach skins. You know, when you get the ones where the fuzz on the peach skin is like really noticeable when you bite into it. There's just, yeah, so much umami, like, you know, black tonkatsu pork broth. It's just so Moorish is probably the best.
Yeah, again, divisive. I think the kind of mushroom umami shiitake thing is definitely something I found on it. I really liked it. I think we all really liked it here, but we were also like bottling it going, oh, I'm not sure people are going to really like this. But it was such a weird liquid. And I think it could be, I've been told by a couple of suppliers that they, you know, the theory is that it's either Ben Riach or Loch Lomond. That seemed like the two most likely candidates. I believe, given, so what tends to happen is if you get like these unnamed things, often they're vatted and then they're disgorged into casks for selling out into the market. So the levels that are in the casks would indicate to me that they were recently filled, which means that it was probably a parcel of stock that was disgorged and then re-racked and sold out into the market, because all the levels of the cask were very high and didn't indicate that it had been maturing for 21 years in that same vessel. I think there's different cask types in there. I think there's a real mix of cask types in there. I think there's wine casks in there. There's perhaps some sherry casks in there, bourbon. I think it's just a complete mushy medley. And I think that's what's happened is it's probably come through a, you know, could be a blender or something like that who's had the parcel of stock and it's not fitted their profile, probably because it's so weird. And they've just vatted it all together and said, just sell it out into the market. I think that's what's happened, and it tends to be the process of a lot of blending houses where they will, like I say, they'll vat it all together and then they'll put it out into market, you know, and we can tell when it arrives to us because we have, you know, the levels of the cask, the fill levels are very high for the age, and also the ABVs are very similar between the two casks. You know, the ABVs will be almost like, you know, within a kind of close tolerable range, which would imply to me that it's been re-racked very recently. So we had the same with like our Isla single malts that we bottled. A lot of those were re-racked, and you know, you can just tell straight away from, you know, we have so many casks coming through, you can just kind of tell. But I reckon it was loads of cask types just dumped together, didn't suit the profile the blender was looking for, and sold out into the market. I reckon that's what it was. But as to the distillery, I think given how dominant all of these kind of weird cask types are, there's no way for me to recognize distillate character there. Like I just don't know. It's sold as Highland single malt, which means that it could have been like, it could have been a Ben Riach. You know, you can sell that as, you could sell that as Highland single malt as an overall defining region, but probably more likely to be Loch Lomond, I would think.
Yeah.
That's why we put, I think.
Yeah, I feel like that Loch Lomond is the kind of distillery that not only plays with funky, weird cask types, they play with funky, weird cuts and distillate styles and stuff like that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, but you could go either way. It's so interesting, so bizarre. I love the tasting notes. Alex reckons it's movie popcorn that's been sitting in stagnant water. Nori
Unbelievable.
seaweed, funky gunky, but good funky. Yeah, umami keeps coming up. And then there's a conversation about magic mushrooms. But yeah, no, I think
Somebody
I
might
don't know about,
tasting.
yeah.
Yeah, it's super weird stuff, but it's there's a lot of things like this pop up in the brokers market, and you know, if the price is right, we're willing to bottle it, or we're willing to kind of look at it as an option. But it's really, the price has to be right, and you know, again, we're seeing more and more of these sorts of things. For me, it can't be more than, in the UK, I think maybe it was £100 or something like that. It can't really be much more than that, in my opinion. Obviously, I know you guys pay a lot more for your whiskey. Your taxes are pretty silly, but it's, yeah. We always look at that equation. You know, how will it come out in the bottle, and at what point is the customer going to be kind of satisfied with it? You know, and it's not about just kind of making as much money as possible, because there's a kind of regenerative thing for us, whereby, you know, we're not beholden to shareholders. It's basically me and my brother, and you know, we'll ask the team, do we think this is the right thing? Is this the right decision? Is this the right price? What do you think? Would you put this in the market? And it's often what gets talked about in the bottling hall. It's like what everyone else is doing. So the first thing we do when we have a new single cast coming out is I will go and see what everyone else is charging, and then I'll see if we can charge less than that. And it's not trying to undercut them or undermine them or anything like that. It's just that, like, I'm looking at the market and I'm like, what would I pay? Like, I used to be a bar owner. I'm also still I still buy whiskey. I recognize value, and most whiskey consumers, I think, will recognize value. You know, that's got to be a crucial part of the equation, is the price to quality ratio. Like, where does it come out, and where's the balance? And not everyone's got £300 or £400 to spend on a bottle of whiskey. People don't, you know, and it shouldn't always be like, you shouldn't always be pitching yourself at that, like, minimum £100, £150 mark as a bottler. You know, for us, it's got to be, you know, we've always looked after our core in everything we do, whether it's the independents or whether it's Dornick. Obviously with Dornick, there's really not enough out there for everyone, and we recognize that. I can't change that, but I can continue making whiskey. I can continue making whiskey every day. And I keep telling people this. Unfortunately, I have to tell, like, Kelvin and we're importers. It's like, don't worry, guys. We're not closing the distillery tomorrow. There will be more. I'm sorry that we didn't plan very well in the early days, because we had fuck all money. But it's like, you know, we had also no idea what we're doing. But there's always going to be more. There's always going to be more coming out from Dornick. So for us, establishing this core is so important to us. We have a strong foundation of people who are really into our whiskey, because you charge a fair price for good liquids, and I buy into your philosophy. You know, you're not just trying to market something at me. You're like humans who are making whiskey and trying to make the best possible whiskey. We can solidify that core. We should be a pretty strong, stable business in the future. And I think as long as we stay honest with people, I think that would be that's really important. Because I know what would happen, for example, if we took on like a commercial director or something, you'd get like the Gordon MacPhail effect, where they'd be like, oh, what the fuck? But at auction, your bottles sell for £500 for a Dornick. So why aren't you charging £395 for it? It's like, well, no, because I'd like to still do this in 30 years' time and have the same kind of core of consumers who are interested in it. And like I said, there's always going to be more. There's always going to be more whiskey. And there's always going to be more Springbank or more Bowmore. And like, don't worry, these distilleries aren't closing. So yeah, it's important to us that kind of price to quality ratio kind of comes out, and we find that balance. But it's, you know, we're here for the long term, and we're kind of only answerable to you know, me to my brother, and my brother to me, and the rest of the staff that are in the business. And you know, like I say, we're whiskey consumers, we're whiskey fans. We're not there just to thrash the market and you know, we don't have investors to keep happy. You know, they're not chasing us saying, right, where's my return? Which can be difficult, I think, for some businesses. So yeah.
Yep.
So refreshing for a new, younger distillery in a very competitive market. whether it's Scotland or anywhere else around the world, that you have your direction and you're just going to go for it, and you're ignoring everyone else and you're just doing what you guys believe in, which is, I think, an awesome thing. Well done.
Yeah, it's maybe obtuse or something of us to do that, but yeah, we've just kind of built up our own philosophies on how we think whiskey should be produced. In our opinion, it doesn't, I go back to Diageo thing again. Like, let's look at the Linkwood, how well that's made, and that takes a big organization to make a whiskey that well and consistent. And all we're doing, hanging on to the coattails of what everyone else does. We don't have a marketing budget. We don't have people who do marketing. It's like these guys are going out and telling a story about the core Diageo product. Somebody drinks a blended whiskey, they get an interest, drink a single malt whiskey, get a bit more interest, explore different single malt whiskies, explore a bit more. Oh, independent bottlers, that's quite interesting. Oh, these new distilleries are quite interesting. We're just down there somewhere at the bottom, and these big guys are just like dragging the industry forward and spending all the money on marketing and education and stuff like that. So, like, I have a huge amount of respect for what these guys do, because it really kind of helps us massively. And we're quite fortunate where we have a lot of very good relationships now with this kind of a sea change, I feel, in the whiskey industry, where there's a lot of younger people coming through into the whiskey industry. It's kind of, I always remember speaking to a friend of mine who's been bottling stuff for 15, 20 years. And he's like, all right, if you want to buy cask, learn how to play golf. And it's not like that anymore. It's like, if you want to buy cask, learn how to play Call of Duty. It's quite different to and that's a good thing. That's really a good thing, because like a lot of the guys that we're speaking to who are our friends at Diageo, who have kind of worked their way up over the past 10 years, they're looking at what we do and they're just like, I fucking love what you guys do. It's great. But they're still wearing their corporate hat. They've got to wear their corporate hat and their Diageo hat, because it's a great company to work for. But what that does mean is that doors will open in the future for us. So the stability of our business is pretty well grounded, so yeah, that's an insight into our way of thinking, and it's kind of led on to what we're doing with the new distillery. So I don't know if some of these are aware of what we're up to with building a new distillery. Can maybe show you some pictures, or if you guys are able to pull up.
We might pour out the Ben Nevis 1997 and enjoy dramming that while we look at the distillery, because obviously that was weirdly you're now part of a group of the standard way to get into a distillery, bottling and hospitality, and then moving into distilling. We're seeing that kind of path a lot in Scotland at the moment. You got like Adelphi and you got Morrison and
other people as well.
Yeah.
We kind of started the other way. We were kind of like hospitality, then distillers, then bottlers. I consider ourselves accidental independent bottlers. But yeah, I think it's all down to continuity of supply. I think it's not stable to be an independent bottler. I think, Alex Bruce recognized this 10 years ago. And we're coming into the market, 5 years later going, fuck, where's all the stock? Where's all these nice casks? So I think it's the same problem. I think Ian Cruiser and Alex and us, I don't know who else. Yeah, anyone who's got or Douglas Lang, all the Langs, various Langs buying Strathern and Ardnahoe, and then the other bits that are built in AD. I suppose some of the old directors from AD Ratry, it's not the same business. Some of the old directors were involved in Clydeside as well. So everybody's kind of looking at it going, we can no longer get stock to keep this business stable, so let's make our own, basically. You've already got the distribution in place, you already understand the processes, you have contacts in the industry, so yeah, it makes it it's definitely the way that you have to go. I think for us, I'd like to keep independent bottling. If we can keep independent bottling in 10 years time, I think we will, but at the level that we are now, I don't know. But we certainly want to secure, we have security over our own stock, and that's kind of the main thing. We'll just keep building our own kind of stock levels, and then the new distillery allow us to kind of accelerate that while kind of maintaining the same principles of production, which is really, really important to us.
Yeah. I think you had a 5-year-old whiskey recently? Was that?
Yeah, so we're at a point now where we're starting to bottle a lot of octaves that were, so in the early days, like I said, we talked earlier about how we raised the money. So we basically fully crowdfunded, non-equity based crowdfunding, so offering future goods and services and closed casks. We signed sold our property to be able to help build the distillery out. But one of the main things for us was to fulfill our commitments early on. So that was basically going to the guys, the original crowdfunders, and instead of prioritizing our own stock and filling our own stock at Dornick, we prioritized filling their stock. And that to us was kind of, again, it binds into what we're all about, is kind of like honesty and clarity. I think we couldn't get, the whiskey world's too small for us to basically like go, oh yeah, well, I'll fill yours next year. I'm going to fill, 100 casks of mine first. It's just not very, it's a bit disingenuous, to be honest, to kind of take that approach. So we're, we're bottling a lot of these octaves that were purchased back from a lot of the original crowdfunders. So what we found recently is that a lot of the original crowdfunders weren't doing it because they wanted an octave of whiskey. They were doing it because they wanted us to succeed and they wanted to help us on that journey, which is a really beautiful thing to kind of to have people kind of appreciate you or appreciate what we wanted to try and achieve. So we're pretty humbled by that. So a lot of them we purchased back. So we offered a buyback. So the original investment was £2,000, and that got their cask, and that got the 50-litre cask, and got their first release of Dornick as well. And we purchased the casks back for the original £2,000 investment, plus 18 bottles, and the 18 bottles were fully duty paid, and they were, we paid all the bottling costs, labelling costs, logistics, everything that would otherwise be charged. So we basically ended up so they would get 18 bottles plus their first release plus their original investment back. So it's a pretty good return. If you want to be like really kind of ruthless about it and just look at the money, your first release is probably worth £600 or £700, and your 18 bottles are probably worth a minimum of £300 a bottle. And then so you've got that plus your £2,000. So if you want to look at it purely from a financial perspective, they've done really well. But they didn't do it for that reason. They did it because they wanted to support what we're doing in the journey. So yeah, we bottled a load of octaves that belonged to crowdfunders, but as I keep saying to our importers and my customers, it's like we really don't have that much. We get asked to do stuff all the time. We get asked to do stuff for like really cool projects, and we're just like, oh, we don't have the stock. And it's very naive of us just to kind of keep bottling 3 or 4 or 5 year old whiskey. Some of it's incredible. I'm tasting stuff at 3 years old, and I'm like, we feel totally vindicated that what we kind of set out is now being achieved. So it's quite comforting from that perspective. But yeah, it's really difficult to get. It's really, really difficult to get. And we put in place this kind of tiered ballot system. On the only thing we can manage is the direct sales. So like for example, the stuff goes to Australia, I can't manage who buys it, what happens there after with the stock. I can just hope that my importers all over the world or my retailers understand what we do as far as philosophy. And we have, I'm not saying this about Kelvin or anything, but we have dropped importers because the stock that we sold them of Dornick never turned up in the market, and that's not a good thing, and that's not our philosophy. So we just basically went, okay, cool, that's fine. You've cashed out. You've cashed in on your Dornick, but you'll never ever be able to buy another bottle or cask or anything from us ever again. You've cashed out. That's fine, whatever. But so we can kind of control that with direct sales. But like I said, we did have it with an importer that we left, but direct sales wise, we have like this tiered ballot system that basically there's 8 tiers, and we only really use tiers 8 to 4. And if you buy for the first time from Dornick, you're in tier 8. So there is a likelihood that you could get a bottle by chance, just by complete chance. You might, the ballot is random. We'll allocate certain numbers of bottles to each tier. So if you enter for the first time, you may well get a bottle in that bottom tier without having done anything. Apart from just kind of entering the ballot. And then the rest of the tiers function as like a reward system. So for example, even if somebody sent me a photo of like, we have an email ballot at Dornick Distillery, so people share photos of like what they've done, what they've opened, what they share, tastings they do, tells a bit about it, and we basically put them up tier status pretty much. Or if somebody sells a bottle, which has happened recently, quite a few went onto the market, but our great crowdfunders and fans of Dornick Distillery basically went, a couple of the guys bought the bottles and were like, these are the bottle numbers, I'm going to open it for this tasting. So the people that sell the bottles get dropped out of the system, and the people who kind of buy the bottles, or the people who open the bottles, get pushed up the tiers. But it's not just about the exclusive single cask. It's not about like the 100, £200 bottles. But if you buy our gin, if you buy our blended malt, if you have a highball with our blended malt or our blends, and you send us a photo, we also reward that as well, because we don't want to be seen as being like, oh, we're only going to reward the, you know, exclusive access bottles, the bottles that people have limited availability, because that's just pretty naive of us as a company to do that. And it's not the right thing to do to the consumer. So we have that kind of tiered ballot system, so it kind of rewards people who are interested. Not that they have every bottle, but they're interested and they're showing an interest. And then, you know, if you open a bottle of our SRV5 for £35, then you're probably going to go up the tier. You know, we're probably going to put you up, which increases your likelihood. So all of that kind of helps kind of distribute it as fairly as possible. But we had to implement that because we had no other choice. You know, our stuff, we were putting stuff on the website and it was just like getting bombarded. You were like, oh, this is annoying. So we had to kind of put our system in place just to kind of slow the whole thing down a wee bit. And the ballot seemed like the only thing we could kind of do to control it. And I would prefer that people can walk into a shop and buy a bottle, which they can, you know, we still supply retailers, but I would like it just to be a normal website, so that like if you're browsing at night and you fancy a bottle, you can buy it and there's not this hustle. I think I kind of mentioned that earlier, how much I hate this hustle in whiskey at the moment. And unfortunately, that kind of our ballot system kind of is because of that. And I suppose plays into it as well, because it is a ballot system, but it's because of this constant hustle for bottles that people, you know, are just like, they're just interested in grabbing as much as they can. And then, you know, what they do with it, I don't know, but it's kind of frustrating as a producer and retailer. That people are just kind of this, you know, hustling so hard to get bottles, and you wouldn't believe the stuff that people say does, like, you know, to try and either get an extra tier status or something. Honestly, some of the stuff that comes through to us is like, and we have some customers that are like pretty offensive towards us and things, and it's just like, oh, it's just ridiculous. The things that like this kind of, I don't know, this privilege that people kind of expect. You know, we have really bizarre emails from people, like really bizarre emails. Like we try and keep ourselves as a pretty, you know, we're a pretty low friction small company. You know, there's not a lot of us here, and you know, you get weird stuff. We had a guy in Germany recently who emailed about like shipping, and my colleagues, we have like a 3-month rule, so shipping from the Highlands is quite expensive. It's not really expensive, but it's quite expensive. So you're like the same price, you're £12 for 6 bottles or 12 bottles within the UK, and it's about £25 to Germany, for example. And it's the same price if you send 1 bottle or if you send 6 or 12 bottles. It's like the same price. So we say to customers, okay, we'll just wait 3 months, and then, you know, or we'll hold your bottles for 3 months and we'll ship them. And our colleague emailed somebody and was like, oh, you know, we've had your bottles for a while, would you like to arrange shipping for them? And he's like, oh, well, because you've had my bottles for a while, you should pay for my shipping. And we're like, logic, I don't understand. So you've been storing bottles with us, we've been paying extra insurance, using the space, but you expect us to pay for your shipping to get the bottles. So we just went, okay, cool, we'll send you a refund and we'll sell the bottles, no problem at all. And then it's like, yeah, no, okay, I'll pay the shipping. That's like an example of like one person's weirdness that we get coming through. And yeah, you see some pretty amusing things coming through to the ballot email, especially.
Yeah, it kind of it feels a little bit like that Black Mirror social media episode, but like a rewards club.
Yeah, I know. Like I say, I wish we didn't have to play into that. I wish we didn't have to do that. I really do. I like this. Tom's right. The customer is always wrong, and it's basically all of us are all ex-hospitality, so it's really great when we can tell our customers to fuck off. You know, and not much about it. The power, I know, it's years of hospitality where you're like, do everything for anyone at any time, to being like, no, you're being an asshole, I'm going to tell you you're being an asshole. So yeah, it's quite nice, but it's also, like I say, like go back to, I wish whiskey was not like this. You know, I wish that buying a bottle of Springbank 10 wasn't as difficult as it is now. So, but it's just, the world's a very strange place at the moment.
Hey Phil, quick question about the years. There's obviously a lot of good Ben Nevis bottled at 96. There's like a Glendronach 93. I feel like we're starting to reach the limits of the cask, and some 96s I've had recently are quite oak, like more oak than spirit. This is obviously a 97 and a 24. Have you, like, is that similar experience that you've seen now? We're starting to get into the next year statements, and 96 is kind of done, or
we just don't get offered. I mean, these things, when I see 96 Ben Nevises on the market now, I see them at a price where we'd have to retail them at like £500, and I'm just not comfortable with that. So I just don't really see them anymore. And when I think we bottle 4, maybe something like that, 4 or 5, maybe 4 96s, and they were all like refill casks, refill batch, refill hogsheads, and we bought them. I think the first one we did was 22 or 23 years old. But yeah, we got I say we got lucky. It's like we selected at that time good liquid, what we thought was amazing liquid, and you know, a few years later, people are starting to recognise that 96 Ben Nevis is a really legendary vintage. But again, going back to these hobby bottler thing, like that's the sort of cask that just get hoovered up by these guys. Also like auction houses, you know, a lot of auction houses get offered casks to be auctioned, and because it tends to be like widows and stuff who offer it out. I know this because I know an auction house who have done this and do this, because he asks me like for prices, or what would I pay for, or what would you pay for like a 2001 Port Charlotte from Sherry? And I'm like, I'm not going to tell you, because like I'm just doing your job for you, because you're just going to scam some old lady whose husband's died. But yeah, so these sorts of things get hoovered up at these kind of levels. I'm a bit tongue in cheek, but it's true. Like it happens, and it's really frustrating. And I've always thought, would I do that? Like, would I do that if I had an auction house and somebody was like, I have a cask with 96 Ben Nevis. How much would this be worth at your auction? And you just go, I'll give you £30,000 for it right now. You know, most people will be like, oh, okay, sure, yeah, I'll take that. Fine. I don't really know much about whiskey, but I'll take that. You know, so it's a bit of a okay, it's not really fair market. But yeah, 96 is very good. So this particular cask is 97, but what it is 2 hogsheads vatted together. One is a January distillation, and one is a March distillation. The distillation from March was below 40% alcohol, and distillation from January was above 40% alcohol. This is the natural strength of the 2 vatted together. So the one that was distilled in January was less like a 1996 than the one that was distilled in March. The one that was distilled in March and was a lower strength was more like 1996 lush fruitiness, and 97 was more kind of more austere. And the 2 together, you still get this kind of balance of fruit. But 97 from January really wasn't that fruity. It was 97 from March that was fruity. And I'm wondering, because maybe that lower alcohol strength just kind of, you know, pushed out those fruits that perhaps were there, but were kind of less detectable. But yeah, vatted together, they kind of got this kind of really nice balance to it. But it's a little bit low strength, a little bit thin on the palate. But I think that was the last Ben Nevis of age that we bottled. Even now, I mean, I got offered some Ben Nevis the other day, young stuff, 2013s. I'm going to give you the price because it's so amusing. It's like just absolutely hilarious what people are asking for these things.
Kelvin or Yale are busy at the bar, but what's your take on 96, 97 Ben Nevis, guys? Thumbs up.
Oh, obviously the best. Oh man, 96 Ben Nevis, legendary. Very, very fruity.
Yeah.
A great example of what 96 can be. If you get one with a bit of funk, then you're winning. Yeah. Did everybody like
totally
it? I missed all that. Yep, good.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, bright, aromatic, got a bit of that rancios kicking it in the back. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, that bottle only lasted less than 2 weeks at the bar, so there you go. I'm just reading the comments here. It's number 2 after the Tully. So Tully was number 1.
Ian.
Yeah, wow. That's fantastic.
We're going to run the poll very soon.
Great.
We might as well kick on to the final dram.
Nice.
Yeah, and now this one I tragically won't share with you guys because I can't really drink rum. The sulfites disagree with me, but I love the smell. It's heartbreaking. Foursquare is one of my favorite distilleries before I realized I had to start popping antihistamines just to drink it.
What is it in the rum that's causing that then? What do you think that is?
I don't know. I've chatted to a few people who are like rum experts, because I know nothing about that. Whiskey is my forte. Something to do with the sugaring. So like apparently some rum distilleries will re-add sugar through a certain process afterwards. I can't remember what it's called. So there's potentially something in that, or it might be some of the sulfites. I'm not 100% certain. So, you know, but
yeah, the sulfites might be, yeah. Did you find it with wines that are like heavy on sulfates? Do you try and find wines without sulfates, is that a thing, or that you
no, I don't think I ever really come across wines with sulfites. I don't really drink much wine either.
So you don't drink, what do you guys like? Is it a goon, or what's your big boxes of wine that you love to drink? So am I stereotyping here, a whole nation?
Look, no, that is definitely definitely a thing, and luckily I've never quite gotten into that side of the drinking vibe in Australia. I've never tied a goon bag to a clothesline and spun it round, you know, like
It's a good idea. It's a good idea.
Yeah, it's a thing, a Hills hoist, you know. But yeah, I'm not 100% certain. I don't drink a lot of don't drink too much wine, and you know, I know which rums are not like technically rum. Sailor Jerry gets a pass for me, but but this smells amazing, and I'd love you to tell us about this, because New Yarmouth is something I had to look up. But is it part of Appleton Estate in Jamaica, or is it just separate?
Yeah, I think it's part of the same portfolio. I find I get really confused with rums myself. I always find when we come to bottle them, I have to do loads of research and kind of figure out exactly what's what. And the codings that come over to the UK, you get, so there's kind of one big main company in Europe that import rum, and they've got a subsidiary office and warehouse in the UK. I think it's Shear. Shear is a Dutch company, and they've been doing it for hundreds of years, importing rum into Europe. And they do a really good job. We work with their subsidiary in the UK, and the guy who I deal with is really great, and he recognises that we like good rums, and we tend to. I think anyone who knows our kind of profile that we like to bottle is kind of like heavier, funkier, oilier. Usually Jamaican rums. That's kind of what we like to bottle, the kind of islas of the rum world. But we've kind of been exploring some other stuff. You know, bottled a really good TDL, bought some Trinidad Distillers Limited, which is like a corporation, so it's not quite like we say distilled at TDL distillery, but TDL isn't a distillery; it's a cooperative that owns distilleries, so it all gets like a bit kind of confusing and muddy when it comes to the rum world. But the liquid's amazing, that's the main thing, and the company that we work with will provide samples, so everything we get to kind of pass on before we bottle it, unlike Whiskey World, where it's like, you know, if you don't buy this cask today, it's gone tomorrow, sort of thing. But New Yarmouth, really great liquid. I think it's the second one we bottled. It's roughly the same sort of vintage. Unfortunately, rum's suffering the same fate as whiskey, you know, where the kind of the higher end stuff, when I say higher end stuff, the more kind of interesting stuff is kind of getting hoovered up, and prices are very high. I mean, I got some I got offered a Coroni the other day for around about £666 per RLA, which means a retail price through normal retail scheme of, you know, importers, retailers, you know, local retailers, some direct sales, in the region of about £850 per bottle for a 1998 Coroni, column distilled, not pot distilled. So that stock that we were buying, you know, wow, I think on my last Coroni, I probably paid £300 an RLA, and I thought that was expensive. I think when I paid £300 an RLA, we only direct sold it. We only sold it through our own website because I couldn't justify putting it out to importers because the price would just get way too high. We'd end up at like £450, £500, which is a bit too much. But yeah, when we first started bottling rums, it was, again, it's like the Ben Nevis thing. When we bottled Ben Nevis, it's like, we just bottled it because we thought the liquid was amazing, 96 Ben Nevis. When we started bottling rums, we were bottling Coronis because we liked them. And that was, I think, our first one was a 19-year-old, 1997 would be the first rum we bottled, Coroni, pot distilled. And it was ridiculously amazing liquid, and we were charging under £100 for it, and we were just really struggling to sell it. And we bottled another one after that because we liked it. So, you know, we've always had that philosophy, whether it's rum, whether it's whiskey, just to kind of bottle stuff that we like, really. And with the rums, we take the same approach. We don't have the base of knowledge that perhaps we should have in rum. I think perhaps a few business trips to the Caribbean might be in order to be able to help that. But yeah, I really love this new rum. It's really rich. I remember it being, again, quite umami meaty as well. It had that kind of really earthy, meaty, charred kind of yakitori grill kind of flavour to it. But super, super delicious. But we've got a couple other rums. I'm doing some Worthy Park pretty soon. But looking at some of the prices, some of these older rums, we're not going to bottle them anymore. The prices are just too crazy. You know, it just doesn't work for me anymore. So even things like unnamed money musks and stuff are just, you know, you're talking 20-odd-year-old unnamed money musk for like £160 a bottle. It doesn't quite work for me, not for our consumer base. But I think rum's suffering from that same thing as whiskies went through 4 or 5 years ago, with that kind of drive for like hoarding and investment and keeping bottles and buying Coronis and buying Belly and things like that. And, you know, it's kind of a bit of a shame, really. Definitely a bit of a shame.
Yeah, well, I kind of agree with Yao. It's us. It's whiskey people who are kind of causing these price spikes. I think, you know, for a lot of it, you find I know that not everyone's in the chat super keen on a rum, and it might be a bit of a curveball for you guys tonight, but I find that you know, people who get super into their whiskey, their single cask, their independent bottlings, their all that, you know, they start looking at other spirit categories. They're like, where else can I find these super cool, super weird, super rare stuff? And it's been rum and cognac and Armagnac, and you know, I'm definitely all aboard the cognac and Armagnac train. I mean, I just bought a friend's 40th birthday, you know, year he was born, distilled cognac for like a fraction of the price, and it just boggles my mind how, you know, how cheap that these, you know, special stuff can be. But we are definitely living this price rise.
The cognacs, I love cognac. I love Armagnac. I think cognac and Armagnac suffer from an identity problem, and I say that I kind of like, you know, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love cognac, love Armagnac. We haven't bottled some cognac, our grown champagne cognac, but it's all UK landed stuff. So we've labelled it as brandy. But I feel like cognac and Armagnac suffer an identity problem, and it's very difficult for people. It's really easy for people to digest the regions in Scotland and be like, Islay, there is these distilleries on Islay and they make this profile of whiskey. So we've had this kind of regionality that people understand in whiskey and have done for like over 100 years, that different regions will make a different characteristic, then constitute a blend. And people understand that. I feel with cognac, if you said to me, like, you know, tell me about a single distillery, name me a distillery in one single appellation in cognac, I wouldn't be able to name you a distillery, because they're all like done in people's gardens and farmhouses. It's more like a cooperative and a blending operation than anything. So I think from a whiskey consumer's perspective, whiskey, it's been so well marketed for so many years, and it's been really marketed in a way which is easy for people to digest. And I think it's down also to a bit of the arrogance of the French, where they're like, no, we will not tell you about this amazing thing. You can figure it out for yourself. You know, why should you be interested in this? You're not worthy. Whereas in Scotch, it's like, we've been pushing this on the consumer for years, like understand the regionality, and this distillery, this makes this character. And it's really easy for people to understand. Also, there's only like, 120, 30 distilleries in Scotland, of which you can probably taste from 100. So you can really it's quite accessible for people to be able to taste. Whereas if you went to cognac or Armagnac, there's like thousands of micro producers making thousands of like their own individual little styles within different appellations. And, you know, I'm a drinks geek, and I really don't know that much about cognac. It's really hard for me to process and understand. I feel like I'd have to spend years trying to understand it. And I'm a geek, you know, so I think they have this identity problem that they almost just don't really care that the world finds it really difficult as well. I think it's like this French thing where they're like, oh, whatever. Yeah, that's your problem that you don't understand what we do. As opposed to being like, how can we market this to the world and help people consume more cognac and Armagnac? It's like, oh, you don't understand. That's your problem. So I think it will never reach the level that single malt is at as well. I just don't think it will ever happen. Because until they completely change this kind of, this kind of image and understanding for the consumer, because the consumer just doesn't get it, and how long do you want to sit in a tasting for 2 hours and have somebody lecture to you about little micro regions in France? You probably just want to drink some cognac and enjoy it or don't enjoy it. But that's my philosophy and theory on it. And that's again from working in the bar, and we've had old cognac in the bar from small single producers and been like, but this is a 50-year-old cognac and it's like £10 a measure. You should drink this instead of this expensive single malt whiskey. It's amazing. And people are like, oh, no, you're all right. I'll just have the whiskey. So it's such a hard sell. It's a really hard sell for people. I don't know how some of the audience feel about that, but that's certainly my philosophy on it.
Yeah, look, I had to sit through like an hour-long deep dive teaching me all about cognac and Armagnac, because they put a whole bunch on the bar. And I was like, wow, this is like really interesting. And it's so in depth, but also, God, I don't remember any of it now. There is just so much. So I do know what you mean. But yeah, we might also, Tom, by the way, you absolutely have to go to the Elysian. Like one of my favorite places to be in Melbourne for whiskey and for other stuff. And yeah. And absolutely, you have to visit. If you like whiskey and you're in Melbourne, it's one of the only 2 places you should ever be. But yeah, we might share the results and see what everyone's favorite of the day is. Ollie, do you want to drum roll it for us?
Yeah, I'll do a little drum roll. I'll just tell them that one of 2 of my churches in Melbourne, like I regularly will avoid seeing like my cousins, my auntie, everyone. When I'm in Melbourne, I go to 2 locations every single time, and I don't think I've ever missed a visit to Kelvin and Yao, and they're truly humble guys. They know their stuff. Please do go visit them.
Absolutely.
Let's see the results.
The brandy. They did bottle one of these crazy grain ones. There's 89 31-year-old brandy. That's pretty great. Look at the color of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
These are all Grand Champagne cognac, and the delivery orders, which is what the stock was provided to us as, refers to them as Grand Champagne cognacs. But the BNIC, which is like the French equivalent of the SWA, can be a little bit picky. So we chose to label them as brandy, which we can legally do in Scotland. So it's early landed, late bottled, which I've always loved that term. Early landed, late bottled. You see a lot in like very old bottlings for wine and for cognac and port and sherry in the UK. It's such a cool thing. One interesting cool thing that I'd like to see more of in whiskey, or I'd love to see again, is we opened years ago this Glenlivet that was it was referred to as the Port Jackson vat. So it was on a sailing ship called the Port Jackson that went from Bristol to Sydney and back, and this cask of Glenlivet was left on the Port Jackson, and they were used that as a marketing. And it was bottled around about 1915, and it's just really kind of cool philosophy to be like, this cask has gone all the way to Australia and it's come back, and now we've bottled it and stuff like that. So it's like, really interesting. Although the Scotch Whisky Association wouldn't let you do that. But it's kind of cool. I think the consumer would appreciate it. It was only a few hundred bottles.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, it looks like the Ben Nevis was the resounding favorite. I'm gonna be controversial. I really loved that Highland. It was so weird. But yeah, thank you, Phil, so much for your time. And I know we've gone a little bit over, but it's always so great to hear, from people in Scotland who come up through the industry in different ways, and having that hospitality background and the way that you guys have approached things with the crowdfunding and door knock distillery. It's so great to hear. And while we probably won't see too much door knock in Australia, it's always nice to see that you guys are doing your thing and succeeding and making great stuff. And I'm sure hopefully I'll get to try some at the Elysian at some point.
yeah, like I said, there'll always be more Dornick, and we're building a bigger distillery, so just hang on in there. It'll make its way.
Yeah, across the pond.
Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah,
too.
so thank you.
Thanks very much, and Emma and all
Thank
our-
you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for the support.
And yeah, apologies for my tangents and language and everything else that I say. But yeah, thanks very much.
Yeah.
Phil and Kelvin, do you guys mind staying on for a minute? Everyone at home, thank you so much for your time again. You know, we've gone a little bit over our usual hour tasting, but thank you, Phil, for sharing all your knowledge and wisdom and just, yeah, a little bit of a insider, you know, tricks and secrets of the industry and indie bottling, such a complicated and, you know, wonderful thing. But the end of the day is we get to try 6 amazing whiskeys and 1 rum, and hopefully a few regular whiskey drinkers are now converting, like yeah, like I have in the earlier days as well, to premium rums. It's such a wonderful crossover.
Yeah.
Cheers, everyone. We got by the way, I will send out an email with a wonderful little thank you link. We have some of the Thompsons available to buy, as well as I'll share the link to the YouTube recording afterwards tomorrow as well, once I process this and upload it. But otherwise, yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Much.
Thanks, everyone.
We